What would you do if your family, your whole foundation, collapsed with one sentence? If the very people who raised you with love, suddenly turned you into a disgrace? You are no longer our daughter. Those were the last words Marina heard before the door slammed behind her. 7 months pregnant and completely alone. She had no money, no home, no plan, just a cold park bench beneath her and a life growing inside her. But what happened next? What began with a stranger in a suit stopping under a flickering streetlight, would reshape not only her destiny, but his. Stay with this story until the end. Because this isn't about being rescued. It's about two broken people saving each other, and building something neither thought they deserved. Right finger, tell us in the comments, have you ever felt completely abandoned, only to find strength in the most unexpected place? The bench was harder than Marina expected. The metal dug into her spine, and the dampness from last night's rain still lingered on the wooden slats. She wrapped her arms around her swollen belly, whispering, "I'm sorry, baby, I don't know where to go." The street lamp overhead buzzed, casting a sickly yellow light across the empty plaza. No one looked at her. No one stopped. Just hours earlier, she had stood in the doorway of her parents' kitchen, clutching a crumpled piece of paper with trembling hands. It was a pregnancy test. Positive. Her mother had frozen mid-step, the scent of warm bread still in the air. Her father had lowered his paper, glasses sliding to the tip of his nose. Silence. Then came the shouting, the shame, the demand to leave, the final blow. That child is not welcome in this house. She didn't fight back. There was no point. The shame was already swallowing her whole. Now, here she was, 22 years old, 7 months pregnant, and nowhere to go. And then, footsteps. Slow, steady, expensive. A man in a dark suit. Immaculate, out of place. His shoes didn't belong on cracked pavement. He stopped in front of her, looked at her, not through her. "Are you all right?" he asked. And that one question, asked with gentle conviction, would unravel everything she thought she knew about life, about safety, about family, because she didn't know it then. But this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the prologue to something extraordinary. Marina never imagined that her own blood could become a weapon. Yet there she stood in the doorway of her childhood home, the hollow clatter of her father's last words echoing in her mind. "You are no longer our daughter." She watched her mother's apron drop to the floor as if struck by an unseen force. In that moment, the warmth of the kitchen, the aroma of fresh bread, the laughter of better days, was ripped away. All that remained was a cavernous silence, broken only by her father's cold footsteps as he turned and walked away. Her mother's eyes, once so full of tenderness, narrowed with disappointment. "Leave before I regret giving you life," she hissed, voice cracking. Marina's heart fractured. How had she, a young woman who had devoted every breath to pleasing her parents, become such a disgrace? Trembling, she sank into the nearest chair, clutching the crumpled lab result in her shaking hand. 7 months pregnant, positive. A simple medical test, intended to bring hope, had detonated the bomb beneath her family's carefully constructed reputation. In their devout community, outside-born babies were rumored about, whispered over backyard fences. Rumors traveled faster than truth. Her father's image haunted her, the stern set of his jaw, the flash of anger in his eyes. He had always been her hero, the one who read her bedtime stories when her mother fell ill, who taught her to ride a bike in that old suburban driveway. Now he looked at her as though she were a stranger, a blemish on his legacy. When her mother finally spoke again, it was with bitterness and fear. "Do you have any idea what this will do to us? To our name?" She spat the words like poison. "Pack your things." And just like that, Marina's world collapsed. In the days that followed, the betrayal cut deeper than the damp chill of early spring. She found herself standing in the rain outside her best friend Lucia's door. Soaked to the bone, Lucia's face twisted with apology as she pressed a letter into Marina's hand. "I wish I could help," she whispered, "but my parents, they said I'd be next." The letter trembled in Marina's grip, inked apologies and regret. But no real shelter. Homeless, shunned, she wandered to the one place that once promised solace, the old park plaza where she and Lucia had shared secrets under the midnight sky. The fountain was dry, the pathways cracked. She sank onto a cold bench, wrapping her arms around her growing belly. The metal pressed uncomfortably into her spine, reminding her just how alone she was. How had everything gone so wrong? She thought, I did everything right. I studied. I worked. I loved them. Tears blurred her vision. Shame coiled in her chest, wrapping tighter with every passing car. She imagined the neighbors watching from behind drawn curtains, pointing and whispering, "There goes Marina Fernande, carrying the burden of disgrace." But amid the despair, a sliver of something else began to stir, a fierce determination. If her family could cast her out so easily, perhaps she would forge a new path entirely, one built on her own terms, where shame could not chase her. Her mind raced through possibilities, couch surfing with distant relatives who might take pity, applying for any library job that would tolerate her condition, scraping together savings for a cramped studio apartment. Anything was better than the memory of her mother's eyes, colder than that bench beneath her. And yet, even as hope flickered, the fear loomed. Where will I go when the sun sets? The thought of enduring another night on that bench drove her to her feet. She needed to move, to find a plan. As she rose, her eyes caught a figure at the edge of the plaza, an impeccably dressed man in a dark suit, pausing under the street lamp's sickly glow. Their gazes met for a fleeting second, and something unspoken passed between them, recognition of shared loneliness. Perhaps. Marina shook her head, chest tightening. Focus. Find shelter. Yet the man did not turn away. Instead, he took a single step toward her. And in that moment, the story shifted. Because salvation rarely arrives as a grand thunderclap, it often comes as a quiet question from a stranger in the night. The man paused beneath the flickering street lamp, his polished leather shoes gleaming against the cracked asphalt. Marina barely registered his presence at first. Her world had shrunk to the bench beneath her, the ache in her back, and the thunder of her heartbeat echoing in her ears. But then he spoke, his voice low and steady. "Excuse me, are you all right?" She looked up. His suit was impeccable, navy wool, cut for a boardroom. His tie swung just slightly off-center, as if he'd loosened it in anticipation of something greater than mere business. His eyes, dark and alert, held no pity, just concern. Her first instinct was to recoil. In all the years she'd known, a well-dressed man stopping to check on a vulnerable woman meant trouble. She'd pictured harassment, manipulation, ultimatums, not a lifeline. She began, but words faltered on her lips. What did she say? That her own parents had evicted her hours ago? That she'd spent the night in a stranger's park? That she was carrying a life inside her, one she had no home to return to? Instead, she stared at him, mute. He extended a gloved hand, gentle, respectful. "My name is Diego Mendoza," he said. "I work nearby. You look tired, cold." A lump rose in her throat. This was the moment she'd always feared, the moment a stranger decided to make her problem his own. A moment she had no defense against. Yet she did not break away. There was something in his gaze, a quiet vulnerability, as if he, too, had been knocked off balance by life's cruelty. Diego reached into his coat pocket and removed a folded cashmere scarf. "Here," he said softly, "wrap it around you. It's too cold to be out here." Marina hesitated. Accepting meant trust. Trust sounded like a luxury she couldn't afford. But the scarf was warm, scented faintly of cedarwood and something uniquely his. She wrapped it around her shoulders, the fabric sliding across her damp shirt. "Thank you," she whispered. The words felt small. "Do you need help getting somewhere?" he asked. "I have a car just up the street." Her mind raced. If she said yes, he'd see her growing belly, learn her secret. She would be exposed. But every part of her, every trembling muscle, yearned for a safe place to land. "Please," she breathed at last. Diego offered his arm. Marina took it, surprised by the steadiness of his grip. He wore a simple gold band on his left hand, not a wedding ring, but something that spoke of commitment. Yet his eyes flickered when she mentioned her condition, regret, resignation, something deeper. As they walked, Marina studied him. His posture was straight, almost rigid, as if he carried invisible burdens on his broad shoulders. The streetlights painted half his face in shadow, an apt metaphor, she thought, for a man clearly successful yet partially hidden behind his own pain. He drove in silence, only the soft hum of tires on wet pavement between them. Marina's pulse began to steady, her defenses lowering. She realized how exhausted she was. The vigilance, the shame, the fear, had worn her thin. Finally, Diego glanced over. "I know what you're thinking," he said quietly, "that I don't know your story, that I can't possibly understand." Marina's heart clenched. He was right. Judging a suit by its cover was human nature. But there was sincerity in his tone she couldn't ignore. I've been where you are, he admitted. Years ago, I lost everything. My brother, my home, my partner. Didn't matter how many zeros were in my bank account. I learned that pain doesn't discriminate. Marina stared at him, tears pooling. A tycoon who spoke of brokenness. It shattered every preconception she'd had. They arrived at a gated driveway, an expansive property walled in softly glowing hedges. He pulled the car to a stop beneath an oak whose branches arched overhead like a cathedral ceiling. This house, he said, voice hushed, was my father's dream. Mine, too, but it felt empty until I met you. Marina's breath caught. She felt like a trespasser. Yet his words invited her in. He unlocked the gate and led her through a side entrance into a small guest cottage, modest, warm, everything she did not expect but desperately needed. In here, he said, flicking on a lamp. The room was simple: a bed, a nightstand, a lamp, soft blankets folded neatly. Marina sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. Diego stood by the door, giving her space yet unwilling to vanish. You don't owe me anything, he said. You're not a charity case. She looked up. Why are you helping me? He paused, studying the vacant lines around her eyes, the way she rocked gently to soothe herself. Because I believe no one should face the night alone. In that moment, Marina understood. This encounter was not a transaction. It was the fragile beginning of two wounded souls choosing to trust each other. She nodded, voice raw. Thank you. Diego gave a small, sad smile. Rest now. We'll figure out tomorrow together. As he left, the door clicked softly behind him. Marina lay back on the bed, the stranger's kindness pulsing through her like a heartbeat. Above the hum of the night, she felt for the first time since her exile, hope. And in that fragile hope lay the promise of healing. Morning light filtered through lace curtains, painting delicate patterns on the hardwood floor. Marina awoke in a bed she never imagined she'd claim, not as a guest, but almost as home. The weight on her chest was not shame or fear this time, but the soft swell of new possibility. She lay still, listening to the distant hum of Diego's morning routine, the measured clink of a mug on a counter, the low whirl of an espresso machine, the quiet turning of pages. She slipped from the covers, every muscle stiff from weeks of sleeping on park benches, and wrapped herself in the cashmere scarf he'd given her. As she padded down the hall, she passed a small shelf where he'd already placed a neatly folded stack of books, novels she once cherished, now loaned back to her as a lifeline. A hand-scrawled note lay on top, for quiet moments. I found peace in words when the world was harsh. Her throat tightened. Words, both theirs, were beginning to stitch the jagged edges of trust. Downstairs, Diego stood by a simple wooden table, sipping his coffee with eyes honed by solitude. At her approach, he set the mug aside, offering a nod that held more warmth than any good morning he could muster. Breakfast? He asked, gesturing to a bowl of oatmeal topped with fresh berries and a jug of almond milk. Something to keep you strong. She hesitated, memories flaring of her father's scorn, his refusal even to share a meal. But this was different. No judgment here, only care. She sat, picking at a spoonful, tasting sweetness for the first time in days. There, she began, voice catching. They threw me out. My parents, my best friend, everyone. Diego's gaze softened. I know. I read your letter. His words hung in the air, unspoken things flowing between them. I lost someone, too, my brother. I was so focused on business that I didn't realize life was slipping away. Then I lost the only family I thought I had. Marina closed her eyes, picturing her own crushing loss, security, belonging, unconditional love. Two souls adrift, both abandoned by those they held dear. Over the next hours, they settled into an unspoken routine. Diego walked the cottage grounds to fetch fresh air. Marina sat by a small window, fish eyeing the garden where dewy blossoms nodded in the breeze. When she stumbled, overwhelmed by exhaustion or fear, Diego appeared, hand on her shoulder, voice a grounding anchor. You're safe here. One afternoon, the tension broke over something as simple as laundry. Marina struggled with a heavy basket of linens, her arms trembled with the effort. Diego moved without hesitation, gently taking the basket and carrying it to the laundry room. I'm sorry I can't do more, she murmured. He paused, folding a sheet with meticulous care. You do more than you know. You remind me why I built this place, to protect people who have nowhere else. They worked side by side, silence punctuated by the whoosh of the washer and the soft click of hangers. In those small acts, sharing chores, brewing tea, stacking books, they began to learn each other's rhythms, calibrate each other's trust. Yet beneath every tender gesture lay a flicker of doubt. Marina wondered, what if he wakes tomorrow and regrets all this? Diego wrestled with his own fear. What if she decides she's better off on her own? That night, rain began to patter against the windows. Marina paced in the living room, heart pounding. She stopped by a photo on the mantel, a black and white picture of Diego and his brother. Laughing, their joy was frozen in time, an ache in his eyes she had only glimpsed once. He found her there. This was us, he whispered, before everything fell apart. Her hand found the frame. She swallowed. I still can't believe you're doing this for me. He stepped closer, voice raw. No one should face storms alone. Not you, not this little one. He placed his hand gently over her belly. Let me carry part of your burden. In that moment, their defenses crumbled. She leaned into him, tears soaking his shoulder. Two fractured souls clung to each other, forging an unspoken bond, that in each other's pain, they had discovered a path to healing. As the storm raged outside, they stood together, anchored in newfound trust, ready to face whatever came next. The morning sun slanted through hospital blinds like a spotlight. Marina sat on the edge of the examination table, fingers entwined in the fabric of her gown. Her heart thundered as Dr. Vasquez stepped out momentarily to fetch paperwork. Marina was alone, just her and the steady beep of the fetal monitor. Then the door opened. Carlos stood in the hallway, panic and something like guilt warring on his face. He was changed from the boy she once knew. A tailored blazer replaced his student jeans, confidence now sharpened his jaw. Yet his eyes, distant, guarded, betrayed a man afraid of consequence. Marina, he said softly, closing the door behind him. The word felt hollow, like a name she'd discarded. She swallowed. Why now, after weeks of silence, after her mother's last scornful letter, after she'd built something fragile but real with Diego? What are you doing here? She managed, voice trembling. Carlos took a tentative step forward. I thought you'd want to know I'm here for the baby. He ran a hand through his hair, as if trying to smooth life back into place. I've arranged financial support, a monthly stipend. I can't be a father in the hospital room yet, but I want to be responsible. Marina's pulse spiked. Responsible. Just weeks ago, he'd vanished at her plea for help, telling her to handle it alone so his budding legal career wouldn't suffer. He had asked her to sign a contract, months of alimony in exchange for silence. Secrecy. Here he was again, offering the same bargain in kinder words. She imagined the neat rows of figures on contract pages, the chilling certainty of dollar signs over her child's future. The memory of that day, stark walls of his apartment, his cold insistence she leave, flashed through her mind. Her chest ached. He had broken his promise to stand by her, choosing ambition over fatherhood. Every syllable he spoke now was steeped in the past betrayal. I don't need your money, she said, voice wavering. I have a home. I have someone who chose me, chose us, when everyone else turned away. Carlos flinched as though struck. Diego is wealthy, he said quietly. He can provide. He can offer stability. Marina squared her shoulders. Stability? She placed a hand on her stomach. You offered me a contract before. You wanted me to carry this baby in secret. You abandoned me at my lowest. That's not stability. That's control disguised as charity. He opened his mouth, closing it again. Tears glimmered in his eyes. Regret. Perhaps. Or fear of losing her completely. I'm sorry, he whispered, laden with years of avoidance. I never meant to hurt you. Her tears, unbidden, spilled over. Sorry wasn't enough. Not this time. I forgive you, she said, surprising them both. But I can't let you decide my fate. Or his. She reached into her purse and pulled out an invitation. Crisp with white linen paper. Baby shower for Marina and baby. Hosted at Diego's home. She pressed it into Carlos's hand. I'm celebrating the life I chose. And the family I chose. His eyes glistened as he read her handwriting. For a moment, he looked like the boy she'd loved, vulnerable, hopeful, but then he closed his fist around the invitation. I see, he said, voice thick. He swallowed hard. I hope he treats you right. She watched him walk away, regret and relief warring in her chest. As the door clicked shut, the sterile hospital corridor felt impossibly cold. Yet in that coldness, she felt warmth, sparked by a choice that defined her strength. She exhaled, lifting her hand from her belly. I choose him. Because true fatherhood wasn't measured in contracts or fear of scandal. It was measured in presence, in unwavering devotion, in love that refused to turn away. And as Marina steadied herself against the sink, she knew the next battle, welcoming back a family who once cast her out. The knock at the cottage door jolted Marina awake from a twilight dream of lullabies and soft laughter. She pressed her palm against her swelling belly, listening as caution whispered in her mind, who could it be? Outside, Roberto's gentle voice called, Senora Fernande, your mother is here. She says it's urgent. Marina's heart clenched. It had been 3 months since her family's final decree. Her mother's scornful eyes, her father's words, colder than winter winds, don't come back until this is resolved. Now, faced with the woman who once locked her out on the street, Marina felt a familiar ache of betrayal. But something deeper tugged at her, an echo of the girl who used to cling to her mother's apron strings for comfort. She straightened her shoulders and opened the door. Rosa stood on the threshold with eyes red-rimmed but earnest, an envelope clutched in trembling fingers. She looked smaller, worn by time, remorse, and possibly guilt. Marina, Rosa whispered, voice cracked. I'm so sorry. Miguel, your father, he's very ill. He needs surgery, immediately. We can't afford it. She swallowed hard, lips trembling. I thought you had moved on. But I had nowhere else to turn. Shame, relief, and anger warred inside Marina. The same blood that had driven her out now needed her. Her mother's desperation resonated with her own when she'd been cast aside, an unintended symmetry of pain. He's in the hospital, Marina asked, catching her breath. Rosa nodded, tears spilling free. The doctors say he has a serious heart condition. Without surgery, he won't make it. Marina's throat tightened. The father who had disowned her now faced death alone. She glanced at Rosa, an apology longer than words lay in her eyes. Before Marina could speak, Diego stepped into the doorway, an anchor of calm. He studied Rosa for a moment, then turned back to Marina. You don't have to decide now, he said gently. Why don't we all sit down? In the living room's warm lamplight, Marina placed Rosa on the sofa while Diego quietly fetched water. The weight of the moment pressed on her chest. Heal him or abandon him. Rosa's voice broke the silence. I know we don't deserve your kindness. We judged you, hurt you, cast you out. I lived in fear of scandal, so I taught you fear instead of love. She reached out, trembling. Please, help my husband. Help your father. Marina clasped her mother's hand. Its skin paper thin, and felt a pulse of compassion flicker. But forgiveness demanded more than pity. It required accountability. Diego returned with Rosa's water and sat beside Marina. Let me cover the surgery costs, he offered, voice firm, but on one condition, that your parents apologize to Marina in front of her daughter. And accept her child unconditionally. Rosa's eyes widened with relief and humility. Anything, she whispered. We will. Marina inhaled, steeling herself. This was her chance to rebuild trust, not blind, but carefully, brick by brick. Then let's do it now, she said softly, voice steady. Miguel deserves that chance, and so do we. She turned to Rosa. Mother, will you look me in the eye and say you're sorry for how you treated me 7 months ago when I needed you most? Rosa nodded, tears coursing down her cheeks. She raised her eyes to Marina's, voice trembling but resolute. I am deeply sorry, Marina, for every harsh word, every cold look, and for turning my back when you needed me. Please forgive me. Marina felt the tightness in her chest loosen. The apology was genuine. Each word carried the weight of regret. Then she faced her father. Miguel remained silent at the edge of the sofa, face pale. Father, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I forgive you for your anger and your fear. I forgive you for not believing in me. Will you ask my daughter, it will be your granddaughter, for her forgiveness? 2. Miguel's gaze flicked to the small cradle in the corner, where silent shadows played on the mobile above. His eyes glistened. To you, he began, voice rough, and to my granddaughter. I am sorry. I acted out of fear for our reputation. I was wrong. Please, forgive me. He saw the tiny handprint on the envelope his wife still clutched, a photo of Marina's ultrasound. The real granddaughter, not a rumor. His breathing caught. Diego stood, clearing his throat. On behalf of our family, Marina, Sophia, and me, I accept your apology. And I look forward to seeing you at the hospital. Together, we'll bring Miguel through this. In the hush that followed, Marina realized something profound. Healing wasn't a single act, but a tapestry woven from admission, apology, and willingness to change. And tonight, two fractured families had begun weaving new threads. As Rosa and Miguel departed for the hospital, Marina lingered at the door. Diego slipped his arm around her. Silent solidarity. She looked up at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered, not just for the money, but for standing by her, for believing in her. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Always. Behind them, the cottage lights glowed warm against the dark night, a beacon of hope for the chapter yet to come. The first time Marina held the pamphlet in her hand, crisp, white stock paper stamped with bold letters, she felt the weight of her own journey settle around her like a mantle. The second step foundation, it read. Subtitled, Supporting Mothers Rebuilding Their Lives. She stood in the small community hall. The same building where she once hid from judgmental glances as a terrified 19-year-old. Now, she wore a tailored blazer and spoke into a microphone. Her voice steady but charged with the raw power of lived experience. Good afternoon, she began, scanning the sea of faces, women clutching children, some with hope in their eyes, others still haunted by the fear of abandonment. My name is Marina Fernandez. 2 years ago, I was here, on the other side of these doors, sleeping on a park bench, pregnant, alone, ashamed. A hush settled. She closed her eyes for a moment, recalling that night, the damp wood pressing into her spine, the distant hum of traffic like a mocking lullaby, the emptiness that threatened to swallow her whole. But someone unexpected, offered me shelter. She continued, her gaze unwavering. He didn't ask for contracts or secrecy. He simply saw me as human, worthy of compassion. Marina's voice cracked, not from fear, but from the flood of gratitude she carried. In the audience, a young mother reached to squeeze her partner's hand. A volunteer wiped a tear. It was the first time many saw their plight reflected in someone who had truly been there. She shifted, remembering her early days with Diego. How they'd tentatively built trust over oatmeal breakfasts and shared chores. How her biological father's return tested her resolve. How her real rebuilding began when she faced her parents at the hospital, demanding apologies. Daring the walls of shame to crumble. That was the moment she realized healing wasn't just about saving one life, it was about igniting hope for many. Today, the Second Step Foundation opens its doors. She announced, her eyes glinting with conviction. We offer overnight shelter, legal aid, job training, and most importantly, a community that understands, because no mother should carry her burdens alone. She led the way to a long table where pamphlets lay in neat rows. Alongside photographs of the guest cottage, once a solitary refuge, now a shared home for up to 6 women at a time. She paused by an image of the park bench, its memory almost sacred. A testament to how far she'd come. Behind her, Diego stood quietly, the visionary who dared to challenge her fear, and his own. Their partnership, forged in vulnerability, had blossomed into a shared mission. He'd secured seed funding, rallied volunteers, and even joined her on the small stage, promising every mother the same chance she'd received. In that moment, Marina looked across the hall at a tearful woman clutching her newborn daughter. Memories of her own early days of motherhood, diaper bags, sleepless nights, doubts gnawing at her confidence, surged back. She moved down the steps, reaching out to embrace this stranger. It gets better, she whispered, voice thick. We'll walk this path together. As the crowd shifted closer, a soft murmur grew, stories exchanged, laughter through tears, the forging of bonds that transcended bloodlines. Later, packed boxes of donated clothes filled the hallway. Lawyers offered free consultations in the corner. A single mother named Carmen approached Marina, her eyes filled with that same distant fear Marina once saw in her own reflection. Marina wrapped an arm around her shoulder. Tell me your story, she said softly, and as Carmen spoke, her voice trembling with hope and trepidation, Marina realized something profound. Her legacy was not a monument or a plaque, but a living, breathing community. Each woman she helped would carry forward the light she once found, guiding others from darkness. That evening, as Marina and Diego locked the doors, they paused beneath the porch light. The cottage's windows glowed warmly, a beacon to any mother who might wonder where to turn. He turned to her, voice tender. "You've saved so many lives, Marina." She leaned into him, cradling the latest donation box against her hip. "No," she corrected softly. "We saved each other." Together, they walked down the path to the gate, the same route she once trudged alone. Now, each step echoed with purpose, compassion, and the promise that no one would ever walk that path in darkness again. And as the night cloaked the world in its quiet hush, Marina whispered to the stars above, "May every woman find her second step."